Welcome all of you to the Values for Life series, episode 47 on resilience. And before we begin, we'll spend a minute in silence and invoke the presence of the Supreme Being. Okay, so again, good morning to all of you now, because I am in the city of Montreal, a beautiful city, and good afternoon and good evening to people in different parts of the world. So welcome to this beautiful value of or virtue of resilience. And it is like, I must say in one word, the ability to be able to bounce back. And I think we have with us a very eloquent speaker, Sister Denise. All of you know her very well, but I would like to speak a few words that she is one of the first Western students who came into knowledge, right, I think in 1974, under the mentorship of Dadi Janki, who was the then administrative head there. And after that, she has been tirelessly serving all parts of the world, Europe and many parts of America. She has been also instrumental in opening up many centers all over the world. A few important things in her CV is also that she has been featuring on almost more than 100 television programs on Raj Yoga, and she has been the director of the Raj Yoga TV many times. And she has also worked for the addicts, taught meditation to them who have been recovering from narcotics at the Los Angeles prison system between 84 and 96. That's almost 12 years total. And she spent her time from 2001 to 2007 at the international headquarters in Mount Abu, Rajasthan, where she has been instrumental in writing almost 10 textbooks. And I'm fortunate that I was one of the person who could do these courses. The most common one, which we say, is the postgraduate diploma in value education and spirituality. And also, she has served the Canada, the land of Canada. She was here as a national coordinator from 2007 to 10. So as always, let me just take a few more minutes and introduce you in the form of a poem. So we have with us Sister Denise, who is indeed full of passion, who always wears the spiritual smile as her fashion. You know, every commodity in the world is now available as a ration, whereby each country on one another is ready to impose sanction. Difficult to find peace in the world, which is full of aggression, wherein every soul is so stressed and under a lot of apprehension. But it's Sister Denise who's ready to serve the world with lots of compassion. So coming to a few words on today's virtue of resilience. So today she shall guide us on how to develop resilience, try to inculcate flexibility and courage to handle any grievance. Life then indeed becomes a beautiful journey to experience, helping souls to achieve what they want at their convenience. We then become supportive and look at everyone with a lot of reverence, with no chance to behave egoistically, which was previously a recurrence. We used to not know what ego is and recurrently behave with people that way. So with this, I would just all of you all a few housekeeping instructions. You can click on the interpretation icon. We have almost 7-8 languages. And as usual, the talk would be for say around 50-55 minutes. And please start sending your questions today to Sister Anu. It's written BK Dr. Anu Patel. So make sure that the questions go to her, because I would not be Thereafter, a few minutes, I have to catch another flight. So please send all your questions either to everyone or to Anu Patel. That should be fine. And thank you once again. I must say, Sister Denise is just a stone throw away spiritually. Whenever I approach her, it's always a rapid yes. So thank you once again for spending your time with us. Thanks.
I'll take a moment. Thank you so much, Brother Manoj. The whole team of Values for Life series and every participant, a beautiful bouquet for our beautiful dear sister, Denise, for sharing her wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is so sweet. Well, I'm thinking all the time about the different subjects that we cover in Raj Yoga, and we talk about virtues and powers and qualities and values. And I just like to mention the historical background about people's interest in values. And when India got independence in 1947, it was a time of closely examining what is India, because it was completely new. What had been India was then divided into India and Pakistan and West Pakistan, and subsequently, you know the history. But every so often, the government would conduct surveys or establish commissions to find out the solution to different problems that it saw, going from a colony of Britain and other countries of Europe, and also having had prior to that, some couple of hundred years prior to that, 700 years of rule by Islamic emperors. And so India was looking for itself independently of those influences, and there were various different problems that were identified. And so there were 3 commissions. I can't remember now the dates, but one was in the 50s, one was in the 70s, and one was in the 80s or 90s. So every 20 years or so, a commission would be established, and the conclusion of all of these commissions is that the problem is people didn't have values. And so they asked different spiritual organizations and religious organizations to create material about values, so that instead of not having values, everybody would have values. And so this word values became a very important word to represent a solution to problems, to represent a wealth of India that would take away the lack of wealth in terms of the experience of people in India about what it means to be a person living in India, a person of India. And so this became very, very important, and it became very large. So any time a positive word was identified, it would be called a value. And we're looking at resilience as a value. But when I was preparing the course in values, I discovered many interesting things. And one thing I discovered was that you really need to identify what you mean by a value. And I think a lot of people believe that any positive word, which is a value, is a universal value. And in fact, it's not possible to have universal values. So resilience is a very important characteristic where you need resilience. But some people are naturally resilient in terms of their position in society, in terms of their circumstances, in terms of their health, and so on. And then there are other people who are not. And so resilience is important in circumstances where you need to be resilient. But if you look at animals, or if you look at plants, you'll see that there are some plants that are very resilient, very hardy, and they can survive very well in harsh circumstances. But then there are other animals and plants which cannot, and when their habitat is disturbed, then they don't survive. And that is not because the plant is good or bad, but it's just the way it is. And then when we take it over to human beings, of course everyone is different, and everyone has their own particular set of sanskaras. Some people are resilient health-wise, but not in other dimensions. Some people are resilient in the world of business. Other people are very clever but not very good business people. So you can see that resilience varies depending on the circumstances and in which particular aspect of resilience you may happen to have. So if I bring it into a spiritual dimension, and we also have to have a look at what does that mean, the spiritual dimension, because we use that word quite a lot. And in one way you could say the spiritual dimension is a very deep and private dimension of the mind where an individual is meditating and communing with God. And in that circumstance, the kind of resilience you need is resilience to that which we call negativity or maya or opposition. So let me talk a little bit about resilience in the spiritual dimension. When a person begins the practice of Raj Yoga, they will come into it from a particular angle, and different people come in from different angles. A lot of people come into it from a religious environment, and their aim is to get something deeper, something more spiritual into their religious environment. But not everybody is like that. Some people, when they come into Raj Yoga, they come in because they're looking for truth. And truth is a very broad term, and nobody really knows exactly what they mean by truth when they say, I'm looking for truth. But spirituality, of course, refers to spiritual truth, and which refers to truth concerning the soul, God, the laws of karma, all of these things. And India is the land of a gigantic array of scriptures, legends, myths, rituals, pilgrimage places, so many things. It's incredibly rich in terms of this. And when you come into the spiritual dimension of India, you're looking at a very broad terrain. And when you come into Raj Yoga is a very specific part of India, which is referred to in the scripture called the Bhagavad Gita, which is very, very well known. And there it's all about the circumstance of striving. We have this word tapasya, which I always translate as striving. You're striving for a spiritual purity so that you can experience and hold yourself steady in communion with the incorporeal Supreme Being. So that's the spiritual dimension. But there is a reaction to that because the world we live in is fraught with difficulties and negativity and so on. Many people will say the world is hell for large numbers of people, those who are in war, those who are suffering from floods, those who are displaced, and those who have financial difficulties, relationship difficulties. And when you want to be in this very subtle, internalized state of communing with the Supreme Being, which we call yoga, there are all sorts of things to pull you away from that. And so you need resilience in that area. Resilience in what way? It means that there will be thoughts that come up, memories that come up, which grab your mind and pull you into various emotions and distractions and memories and irritations and all sorts of emotions that you would not call spiritual, or that you would not call positive or pure, but they're realities, because when you want to sit still and be quiet and go deep inside, then all the things that lie in your mind and that you distract yourself from by getting busy with other things, they all come crowding in. So you need a lot of resilience for that. Why you need resilience is because when people are doing the work of spiritual practice, they don't necessarily expect that they have to resist anything negative or any distractions or any upsetting things that interfere with their yoga. So you need resilience in that area, because your attitude towards all this negativity has to be neutral. Because if you're pulled by it, if you don't like it, if you get fed up with it, if you lose faith in yourself and your ability to meditate, then you can't, because it's such a very subtle thing. So that's one aspect of resilience in terms of your inner life, your meditation. But the spiritual dimension is also broader, because you are a spiritual being in a physical body, living in a material world where you have many responsibilities and there's all sorts of things going on and you have to deal with them. And there's a lot of pairs of opposites. So one of the things that we learn about in the Bhagavad Gita is a very interesting shloka which says that you need to have neutrality in the face of the pairs of opposites. And it's a very, very famous phrase. And so anyone who wants to work on themselves and develop themselves, they will sooner or later encounter this aphorism, this statement from the Gita, which says you must be neutral in the face of success and failure, fame and defamation, heat and cold, comfort and discomfort, all the various positives and negatives that keep coming at you from all directions. So I think that there is a very deep connection between striving for neutrality and striving for resilience. Because after all, as Dr. Manoj said, resilience is about the ability to bounce back. And if you're neutral about things, they may come at you one side or another and pull and push and all of that. But you can recenter yourself in that place of equilibrium where you are actually neutral between these various different pairs of opposites. And it's not easy to be neutral. So then the question that arises is, how do you develop resilience in the form of neutrality? Because I think as neutrality, resilience is quite good as a value. It's a very great advantage if somebody is neutral in the face of all these pairs of opposites. So neutrality doesn't mean that you disconnect yourself. You need to be able to feel the power of the positive and negative and to be able to handle that. I think sometimes people, when they try to be neutral, they tend to shut off their sensitivities. And when you shut off your sensitivities, you can be insensitive. But I think insensitive and neutral is not the same thing. I think that to be neutral while you are sensitive to everything is actually a higher value. It's a very good value. But that means that you have to be powerful. And in the study and practice of Raj Yoga, we do learn about developing different powers. And there are 8 in particular which are really very, very useful for anyone who is in the circumstances of the pairs of opposites. Things go well, things go badly, people like you, people don't like you, you have a good reputation, something comes along and ruins your reputation, which is nothing to do with you, but everyone believes it. So you have to handle that. So handling things has to do with the power of endurance, the power of tolerance, and this is one of the very important powers that you get in Raj Yoga. So resilience as a value, but also as a power, is very, very important in a person's life. Now, many people talk about stress. This is the big thing. Everybody is stressed. And some people think, let's try and have no stress, but that's very difficult. I think it's better to be able to handle stress. That means you have to develop resilience in the face of different kinds of stresses. And because stress is such a big issue, so many people talk about it, there's so many articles about it, programs about it, that it's a very dominant focus of attention. But I think resilience in the face of stress is a really very, very good thing to develop. And I think you can develop resilience in the face of stress quite realistically, because the question arose, how do you develop resilience? So if you think for a moment of all the things that stress you in particular, and what does it do to you when you feel stressed? And usually it diminishes your ability to function normally. And so that means that you cannot function normally because you are stressed. And the stress may be economic, it may be social, it may be emotional, it may be because you are having to do too many things in too little time, and you cannot handle it, but yet the circumstances are upgrading your stress, and then you react to that physically, emotionally, professionally, in all sorts of ways. So to develop resilience to stress in the workplace, stress in the family, stress in terms of your physical health is something that you can actually do, and there are techniques for it. I think whenever a person uses a technique, it is short-lived, because anything that's a technique, it doesn't have the same power, the same impact as something which becomes part of you. And so to develop an ability above and beyond a technique is what we're talking about here when we want to develop resilience. And I think in the process of developing resilience, you will definitely apply various techniques. So sometimes people say, okay, you have to breathe in a special way, and then you'll use this technique to manage your stress. And that's okay for a little while, but it doesn't last very long. So it's all about making yourself stronger and more flexible. So that means you have to really look closely at yourself and see why you don't have resilience. And that's a very personal thing. One of the reasons why a person doesn't have resilience is because they take things personally. That's a very deep matter. How to not take things personally ever. We always hear about it. Oh, don't take this personally, don't take that personally. And you say, yes, I won't take it personally, but you do take it personally. So to actually not take something personally, you need a wider, broader understanding. And I'll give you an example of this. I was talking to a few people recently who were all dealing with a similar issue. And they were all writers. And a writer, a professional writer, has the stress of their editor, their news editor, or their publisher, or something like this. And the publisher puts demands on them. They want the material now, they want it in a certain format, they want it without any mistakes, and so the writers had a particular issue connected with spelling and grammar, and this was making them feel that they were not very good writers because they had a problem with grammar and spelling. And this is actually optional, to think of yourself as not very good because of those reasons. And if you examine what a writer is and what a writer is for and what a writer does, is a writer will present ideas in written form. And if it's grammatically correct or the spelling is incorrect, that's really very minor. But in their environment, this minor thing was made into a major thing. And when I was talking with them, I really needed to remind them that it is normal in certain environments for people to take a minor thing and make it into a major thing to make you doubt yourself. So that the reason behind this sort of thing is quite underhanded, and a person will feel personally under attack. But when you forget to keep everything in proper perspective, this creates a big stress which it doesn't have to once you realize what the game is. So there are games that we find ourselves in the professional environment, in the social environment, and these environments are competitive. Sometimes people say, well, there shouldn't be competition. Why do they say that? Because they want the competition not to be competitive, that's all. And if a person buys into the game, they are diminished in their ability to function. And all these games add to stress and add to the skewing of the merit of people in different environments. So the human world is complicated, and how do you make yourself resilient, bearing in mind all these games that are going on? And you need to be able to see what's going on, although it may be very sophisticated in how it hides itself, the game, and the players of the game. So I think that in order to be resilient in that arena, you must not be naive, and you must not take things at face value, because how it seems is not how it is. And if you are naive and trusting, you will assume that people are being honest with you, and actually a lot of the time they're not. And you need to be able to see it. So what I'm getting at is that in order to be resilient in a complex environment where there are a lot of games going on, you have to be able to discern and discriminate very well. And this is another of the powers that we learn about in Raj Yoga, power of discrimination. Now, a lot of people don't like that word discrimination because they think it means prejudice, but actually it doesn't. Discrimination means that you can see exactly what's going on, even though it is hidden, or even though it is not evident or not obvious. But you can discern what is there. You can discriminate between what is presented and what's really there. Now, why the word discrimination has bad press is because people use the word discrimination indiscriminately, which is interesting. They will apply the word discrimination as a catch-all to refer to anything that they think is unfair. And so this is another problem. Language gets used quite inappropriately. People use words without bearing in mind the meaning of those words. If we say race discrimination, it means that you will favor someone according to their race, where you should be favoring them according to their qualifications or their character. And then if somebody who has the necessary character and qualifications is not chosen because of their race, then that will be called racial discrimination. That means that you evaluate a person by the color of their face for something that has nothing to do with the color of their face. This is the meaning of discrimination. But hardly anybody thinks about it like that, or realizes that that's what the problem is, or why you use the word discrimination in that way. But in order to be resilient, you have to discriminate what the game is that's going on around you, so that you can become neutral and not be manipulated by the game into getting disempowered or doubting yourself, because this is going to force you to not be able to function properly if you don't discriminate that. So to build resilience, you need to build discrimination to really understand the games that are going on. Then you also have to have your own personal ethical policy. And many people think that ethics is general, and everyone has the same ethics and you use the same ethics in all situations, but no. Everything has to be looked at, bearing in mind that the world is complex, and a lot of people oversimplify it and then they get into trouble, because you cannot oversimplify something complex and get away with it. You will find yourself in trouble. So in the same way, you need to be able to catch the essentials. And that means to find the simple, clear vision of whatever is in front of you, so that you can see it clearly and accurately. And then that way it is simple, but that's not the same as simplistic. It's not the same as being simple-minded. It is that you are able to catch the essential. And then anything that is non-essential, you can put it aside very easily. And this is going to give you the power of resilience in various different settings. But you can see that the value of resilience is not really limited to just the word resilience, but you have to go into it and look at it in different contexts and understand how it applies to you in your situation at this time, and what sort of resilience do you need to develop at this time in this situation. And one of the other very interesting, well-known aphorisms that you find in the Bhagavad Gita is that situations arise, they persist for a while, and then they fade away. And that applies to everything and everyone, but especially situations. So whatever is your circumstance that you're dealing with and developing resilience around, that circumstance will not be there forever. A time will come when it's not there anymore. And you also have to discriminate that you may think, okay, I have to develop resilience regardless of what the circumstances are at whatever stage I am in my life. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to develop resilience for a particular time, particular circumstances, and then gradually, as you pay attention on developing resilience, you find that you develop different types of resilience as life goes by. And you are accumulating all kinds of different aspects of resilience, and then ultimately maybe people will think of you as a very resilient type of person because they see your resilience in many different circumstances and situations. So there is that part. Now, sometimes you may find yourself in a situation where you're unfamiliar with that situation. It's a new situation. You don't have the characteristics and expertise and experience to be to function well in that situation, and that may also be very stressful for you. And so part of developing resilience in a situation like that is that you need to give yourself time to become familiar with a new situation. Because one of the difficulties of coming into a new situation is that you're the only one in that situation who's new to it, and the other people around you are not new to it. So you're at a disadvantage purely because you're new to it. But it may be that people will give you a hard time, or you will experience that you're having a hard time because you don't know what all the other people know. And to be resilient for that is something that can be quite difficult to develop, because you are sort of out of your familiar territory. This may happen when you move to a new job, or you move to a new country, or you go somewhere where it's a completely different culture. Whatever is the tacit agreements and understanding between all the people surrounding you, you don't know what that is because it's tacit. Tacit means nobody talks about it. And but everybody grew up with it, so everybody knows. And if you ask them, they won't tell you because it's tacit, you see. So this word tacit is quite an important word because it can put you in a very uncomfortable situation, because you're the only one who doesn't know what is tacit, and nobody will talk about it. So to be resilient about that means you have to be resilient regarding your emotions and feelings around being in an uncomfortable, unfamiliar social environment. So to get resilient about that is something that is quite useful, because you do find yourself in completely new situations every so often. Depending on the individual, I think probably the majority of people don't shift culture and work and place and so on. Majority, they grow up somewhere, they know what the tacit agreements are, and they stay there from birth until death. So they don't need to have that kind of resilience. This is a kind of resilience that's needed for those individuals who keep shifting places, shifting jobs, shifting people who are around you, shifting cultures. And when you do it for the first time, you experience it being quite difficult. But once you've done it many times, you're increasing your experience, and the increase of experience is what gives you the resilience, and that you do not feel as uncomfortable in a similarly uncomfortable situation. And that takes the form of resilience, but I think that kind of resilience is a direct result of experience. So experience and resilience, I think, go together quite well. Another very important thing to be aware about is that you may be a person who's very sensitive, who's very fragile in many cases, and you feel everything too intensely, and you dislike things very easily, you like things very easily, you feel different. And how do you build resilience if you're somebody like that? Because you may have some resistance to developing resilience, because you may think that if you develop resilience, then you have to give up your sensitivity, your refinement, your culture, all this kind of thing. But I think here resilience is to do with finding compromise, finding common ground, finding areas where you can compromise without compromising the things that are really important to you. And if you judiciously create compromises, bearing in mind the circumstances and the social situation and so on, this ability to make compromises will actually give you a very good form of resilience. So I think I will stop there, because I've covered lots of different kinds of resilience, and I think that you may have questions and comments about this. So let me turn it over to Dr. Anu. Thank you very much.
Very much, Sister Denise. Right, it's like so many aspects to resilience. Yes, I'll invite everybody to post your questions to me. What was the highlight is how to have that emotional neutrality or balance. Gita.
It seems to me that you have it when you are very sure of yourself, very confident in who you are, and yet the circumstances around what I was speaking of as games, the main purpose of the game is to put you off balance. And so you need to understand that the game is going on, and it's not just you, but the game is to make you emotionally distressed, because it's a competition. And if a person is good at making somebody else unbalanced, emotionally distressed, and press their buttons or whatever, they will do it purposely to gain an advantage. And if you can't see the game that's going on, you won't be able to respond to what's really going on, because they will try to make you respond to the trap that they're setting. And if you can see the trap and recognize it, then you won't fall into it, and you will remain in your power. And to practice this is very, very important, because this kind of game and these kinds of traps are all around. And there are a lot of people, because of jealousy, because of competitiveness, because of desire of one kind or another, they will develop competence in getting unfair advantage over other people. And if you're too naive and you take things at face value, you won't see it. And then you can get emotionally distressed because you haven't understood the game. So you need to understand the game. Whether the game is good or bad, it doesn't matter. The point is, the game is going on, you understand the game, and you position yourself to respond to the shots that are sent your way in such a way that the intention to destabilize you, you neutralize that, you see. And if you try and neutralize yourself in the face of what they are sending to you, it means you hadn't understood what's going on. So this is why the power of discrimination is extremely important in the overall matter of building resilience. Does that make sense to you?
Not neutralizing yourself to the demand of the game, but neutralizing yourself, your emotional self. Right.
Well, you're sensitive, and you have been trained that you have to be good in particular ways. You have to be polite, you have to be this, you have to be that, and they know that. And they know how to destabilize you because they know what your conditioning is. So you need to understand that you have been conditioned to be vulnerable, and you have to decondition that conditioning. Now that's social conditioning, and that's not the same as who you are. That's not the same as what your emotions are, you see. So it's quite a complicated thing, just being a human being in this day and age. But if you really understand it, you'll be ahead. You'll be able to manage. And in this way, you actually command quite a lot of respect from the other players, you see, because anybody who is very skilled in destabilizing somebody and that person doesn't get destabilized, they will be impressed.
That's really interesting to see yourself in the game, like a game that is being played. And as you brought our attention, we need the two other powers, that's discerning power and discriminating from right and
Exactly.
sometimes as we believe what is our goodness or that naiveness or that sensitiveness to care for others, we don't let go of it. When the situation presses us to be resilient, we need to let go of it. So would you elaborate on that?
No, that's absolutely right. You see, the problem is this. In many cultures, patriarchal cultures, women in particular will be trained that you have to be nice when people are abusive. You have to be tolerant and not set up boundaries, and you have to. And we have, you know, in India, this incredible deep mythology of the Ramayana. It's very deep. It's very much explaining about maryadas, you see. And maryadas are boundaries. And there are healthy boundaries and there are unhealthy boundaries. And, you know, people put you in traps from childhood onwards, and they will use these myths and legends to reinforce the trap, and you fall into the trap just totally, and because you don't know it's a trap. So when people are abusing you, and when they are crossing their boundaries, you have to put a boundary up which says you may not cross this boundary. And they may say, oh, but you're not being a good host, or you're not being a good woman, or you're not being kind. And in that way they will get you to put down your boundary, which needs to be there, so that they can take advantage of you, you see. And you need to understand that. And you need to understand that you have rights, and everybody has rights, and your rights stop where they impinge on somebody else's rights. This is where the boundary comes. But in patriarchal cultures, they teach that women don't have rights and that people can cross any boundary they want to take advantage of that woman and then make her look bad and make her feel bad. And this is a very sophisticated system. And if you want to be able to function well in that game without being manipulative and dishonest and all of those things, you have to be very skilled, because usually people handle that game using seduction, using dishonesty, finding other people's weaknesses and jumping back at them. So it becomes a very complicated game of vices against other vices. You see what I mean? And if you are a person who genuinely desires to be a pure, virtuous being, you need to be very skilled in handling yourself as a pure, virtuous being in an environment which does everything possible to take advantage of your innocence and make themselves look good and make you look bad because you're not skilled enough, you see. And so these kinds of skills are pretty important to understand and to acquire and to develop. And this is very tricky for a person who's motivated by goodness and purity. You see, if you're motivated by badness, it's easy, but then you're not, you see. And that's what makes it difficult. I'm not hearing your sound.
Yeah, can you hear me now properly?
Yes, yes.
Really powerful. It's about knowing my motivation, if it is pure, clean, and sticking to that, while also knowing what people are doing, as you just said, that just don't go with the face value. So it's quite a skill. And as you say, we have to create understanding, practice, experience, and grow it in us. Is that?
Yeah, and experience is really a very good attribute in this, and study, and really the key factor is self-respect. And as you know, in the teachings of Raj Yoga, it is always said, never step down from your seat of self-respect. So that means to say that your respect for yourself has to be greater than your respect for the other people. And they won't like that idea, but it's actually a very important idea. Because if you are really in your self-respect, and other people are trying to get you to respect them for being disrespectful to you, you have to call a spade a spade. You have to challenge it. And you have to become very diplomatic, not in the way that in India they use the word diplomacy, but the real meaning of the word diplomacy. You need to be able to represent yourself without getting emotional and without falling off your seat of self-respect, but really stay in your seat of self-respect and represent yourself and position yourself and use language in such a way that that game is neutralized. And that is a very big skill, and it's called diplomacy. And people who are diplomats have to be good at that.
The real understanding of diplomacy, that without being emotionally affected, if you can represent yourself, your true self. I also liked it that respect for the self greater than others, but I think I don't have to be disrespectful to others. I think that also comes in difficult.
Well, if you're really in your self-respect, you won't be disrespectful to others. What they're trying to do is to distress you so much that because of being emotional, they can say that your reaction is disrespectful. It's a very complex game, but that's what it is, a game. Not hearing you.
It's good. I'll come closer. So I'm getting quite a bit questions on the chat box. Let me take on that. I think one important question is being asked, that is it that I have to meditate more hours to have this clarity, and what?
It might be good to meditate more hours, but I don't think meditation quality is determined by how much time you sit and tell yourself that you're meditating. My definition of meditation is to think very deeply about what is worth thinking about. And what is really worth thinking about is, what is the meaning of self-respect? And you need to think about that deeply. Meditation, just sitting in front of an image or something like that, that's not meditation. That's just not doing anything else. And a lot of people really don't know how to meditate. But if you take this description, meditation is to think very deeply about what's worth thinking about. The first aspect of meditation that's needed here is concentration. Because if you're supposed to think about what is self-respect and you're thinking about something else, then you're not meditating, you got distracted. And when you think about, okay, what is self-respect, then you have to think about the study, the spiritual study. What does it tell me about self-respect? What is the meaning of this seat of self-respect? What exactly is that? What are the boundaries that I have to establish so that not just I come out of my boundaries, but somebody else doesn't come into my boundaries? So we have to think about these and think about who you are, you see. And you remember this very famous 3 statements from Daddy Janki that are very simple. People did hardly pay attention to them, but they're very deep. And she used to say Om Shanti 3 times. And the first Om Shanti is, who am I? Not what am I? Who am I? What am I? A soul. Okay, we got that. But who am I? Who exactly am I? Which soul am I? What kind of soul am I? And the second one, who do I belong to? You know, I belong to God. I'm a child of God. This is where you build your self-respect. Not I am a devotee. I am an heir. I am a child. I have the most important person in existence is my father. And anybody wants to disrespect me, they have to face the consequences of who they are trying to disrespect. You're trying to disrespect somebody who knows that they have that relationship with God. So you have to not demand respect, but command respect, you see. And then, what must I do? That was her third Om Shanti. So how you conduct yourself, what words you use, how you're able to represent yourself without getting emotionally flustered, this is a big piece of work. And this is very essential. This is meditation, you see.
Very powerful, very, very powerful. That's real meaning of meditation. That self-respect, that whom they are trying to disrespect, I mean, that connection with God has to be really felt, experienced, and brought into action.
But you have to affirm to yourself that I am this. You see, because people usually think rather low of themselves, especially people who've been conditioned to put themselves in second place, or to think of themselves as less than, or not having any rights, or not having any value, you see. And this is all to do with conditioning. And it's a lot of work to undo this conditioning and get it right, you see. So all of this is a study and a practice and a discussion and a dialogue and all of these things. And sit with yourself and say, okay, now, in what way does God look at me? In comparison with in what way do these various people who want to disturb you emotionally, how do they look at you? There's a big difference. And now, whose eyes do you want to stay in? Do you want to stay in the eyes of your Supreme Father, or do you want to allow other people to project onto you and then diminish yourself as a direct consequence of allowing that kind of projection? You see, it's up to you. That doesn't mean it's easy.
That's right. It's not easy, but it's so powerful. It's like knowing the two eyes, what is being projected and what is that I am truly. So using the power of meditation, that's what, as you said, self-affirmation, that's what I have to stay stable in first. Resilient, and as I have been listening to you, being resilient is also conducting yourself with respect, with not diminishing others' rights. So I think it's a very important.
Need to. Yeah, you don't need to, because you know, when you say to yourself, you know, I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light, that's a very powerful statement. And then you have to be that, you see. Because if you just say, I am a pure, powerful, peaceful being of light, and then get emotionally distressed at the smallest little thing, that means you haven't really understood what you just said about yourself, you see. And that's why it's part of meditation, because you have to make it very clear to yourself that this is who I am. And you call the shots, not other people. You affirm, this is me, and okay, now what do you have to say? Not the other way around, you see.
Beautiful. So the key is also that if I'm emotionally shaken, then that's where I'm not stable in my self-respect, and the resilience or the right conduct or behavior won't come. In this regard, there is a question though, that somebody's asking, all this needs practice, and for that we need to come in contact with people, but sometimes we get caught unaware.
All the time. All the time we get caught unaware. All the time we mess up. All the time we betray ourselves, but don't give up. Do not give up. That's a very, very important thing that I also learned from Daddy Janki. Don't give up. Don't wait for other people, but, you know, cut your own track, cut your own trail and go and move forward. And if you fall down, then just get back up again. And if you mess up, just start again. And don't give up. Don't give up. That's also resilience, you know, just not giving up.
Giving up. There's another question. So somebody is asking, sometimes people leave you alone in spiritual gathering of Brahmins. You are alone in knowledge. How to deal with it? Feels lonely at times.
Well, if you are studying Raj Yoga, you will have heard that a very important attribute of Raj Yoga is to have all relationships with one. So one very interesting perspective that you can experiment with is this, okay? Everything that you can perceive through your eyes and ears is actually located in your mind, not in the room or out there somewhere, because perception occurs in the soul. It doesn't occur in the room, you see. And you need to really study about this, because if you get it, then whether they leave you alone or they don't leave you alone, it doesn't actually matter, because you know you're not here for the purpose of other people you know, telling you you're wonderful, marvelous and fantastic, or talking to you or whatever. And I know that depending on the culture, some people, they can manage to be ignored and isolated and you know, put on one side, but many people, they just cannot bear it. And whenever you get a really difficult situation, my feeling is that, and of course it's you on the inside of your body perceiving it through your eyes and ears and everything, that, oh, they are not talking to me. What does it mean? You see, because people always say, what does it mean if somebody's not talking to me? Does it mean they don't like me? Does it mean I'm not good? What does it mean? Well, you can tell yourself this. What it means is that there's an exam happening. And anytime something is difficult and unpleasant, I always say, this is an exam. And an exam is there to teach you something, to tell you something that you really need to understand or that you need to develop. And so if people are leaving you alone in the spiritual gathering, what's actually bad about that? Because why do you come to the spiritual gathering? You come to the spiritual gathering for studying, for meditating, and for practicing being with yourself and with God, with all kinds of people around. So if they leave you alone, that's actually better, you know. But if you don't say to yourself why you're there in the spiritual gathering, and you think you're there in a social gathering, and they're leaving you alone in a social gathering, it means you haven't understood. This is not a social gathering, this is a spiritual gathering. And the purpose of the spiritual gathering is for you to be you, even though there's lots of people around. They may or may not interact with you. If they interact with you, then you need certain skills, and if they don't interact with you, then you need other skills. And the other skills involved when people don't interact with you is to upgrade your value for yourself. Because if you evaluate yourself based on how other people are treating you, you are completely a victim. You are at their mercy. And as a Raj Yogi, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not what a Raj Yogi is. A Raj Yogi can never be a victim. If people are good to you or not good to you, what does it matter? This is again the pairs of opposites, you know. Somebody's with you all the time or leaves you alone, ignores you, disregards you. Be neutral, be in equilibrium. This is the test. This is what Raj Yoga is all about. And you are alone. You know, Dadi Prakash Mani, who was the great leader of the Brahma Kumaris after Brahma Baba, she used to say every day, eat 5 bananas. That means akela. You are alone, you were born alone, you die alone, you are alone, you will be alone. Be okay to be alone, because this makes you really very strong. and very much your own person and free and independent is not bad. So always take advantage of apparently negative situations to develop something very important in yourself, because any situation you can say, as we always say, all things in the drama are good, but then you have to see what's good about it. What's good about people leaving me alone? Plenty. You know, it gives me an opportunity to really be me, independently of what other people like or don't like, you see, and that is very good. Nothing wrong with that. May not be comfortable, may not be pleasant, but you're not here for things to be comfortable and pleasant. You're here to get wisdom. You're here to understand something. You're here to get deep. You're here to grow. You're here to become a good quality Raj Yogi, right?
So much, yes. So it's a spiritual gathering where we are here to understand the self and be the real self. And everything that's happening is an exam or trying to teach me something about me. Connects with the meditation, spiritual practice, meditation, knowing the self, and being resilient. I'll just take one more question quickly, that if things do not go as planned, I mean, is there any breaking point where I say, leave it there, and is it still resilient? Like,
the thing is this, as you go forward and you go from one situation to another, you are a student in the spiritual university, and you're going from one class to the next, and every time you go to the next situation or the next class, it's going to be more difficult. Now, lots of people think, oh, you know, it's difficult at the beginning, easier later on. Nonsense. It's very easy at the beginning, very difficult later on. It gets more and more difficult. You go from kindergarten to middle school, high school, university, doctoral, postdoctoral. It doesn't get any easier. And there's less and less people around as you get to the higher levels of whatever your study is. And so just bear that in mind, and make yourself ready for the next level, because it will come. And when things don't work out, it's a test. How do you handle things when they don't work out? Lots of things don't work out. Lots of things will embarrass you, humiliate you, disturb you, etc., etc. In those circumstances, how do you handle yourself? Use the powers, use the qualities, virtues, values, and make yourself more and more expert, more and more experienced, and keep going. And understand that you are being evaluated by God and by your own self, and your aim is to move forward, not to give up.
it is such a deep, value, this resilience, and you have brought us quite a like attention to the self, and emotional stability, and situations will be bigger and bigger, and we have to still move on being resilient rightly. I think the time is moving fast, so I will invite Sister Claudia, is joining us from Brazil today, to welcome Sister Claudia to.
Very nice to hear you. And first of all, good afternoon from Brazil. If you are there, I am like 2 hours and a half from Olinda, where you came before, but I am more in the interior today, and I came for a meeting with family meeting. So many came from different parts, so we are together now. but I could not miss your class because I know how much resilience you have, and I want to learn a little bit more. So it was very nice because I always thought about the resilience. I know I have quite a bit, and I know where I come, but I did not know it's all about the self-respect. If we respect ourselves, if we know who we are, no matter what happens, no matter what people tell us, we are still there because of our self-respect. So yeah, I do not know self-respect is the one who makes us resilient. So thank you very much for opening up and all these points and to be with us. It is so nice to have you with us. I could not, I was all the time on the car saying, how long, how long, how long, because I cannot miss this one. So they run here to get me the place so I could have the computer on, so I could hear to you. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's my great pleasure, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful time in Brazil and give my lots of love and remembrances to the Brazil family.
Thank you so much, Sister Claudia, for joining in, and Sister Denise, and everybody who are here. Of course, we'll go for meditation experience with Sister Denise. Because before that, let me just quickly take you through the upcoming programs very quickly. As you all know, we always do the values workshop on the same values. We take enough time to explore more deeply about the value and bring it in our actions. So again, on resilience, we'll have the values workshop 1 week after, that's Saturday, 10th September, 7:30 p.m. India time, that's 7 a.m. West Coast time. We'll have experiential reflective exercises to see it in ourselves and how to grow. And in the second hour, we'll have Sister Judy Johnson from the eastern part of Canada, from Halifax. She will again take us through an insightful talk and meditation on resilience. So please note and join. We had been doing the powers, the spiritual powers. We have 8 spiritual powers that we study at Brahma Kumaris. So this is the 8th power, power to cooperate. In Hindi, it's Sahyog Ki Shakti. And for that, we will have Sister Suman, who is a Raj Yoga teacher. She will be joining us from Gyansora. That's the headquarters of Brahma Kumaris at Mount Abu, India. It's happening on Sunday, 11th of September, 8:30 p.m. India time. That's 8 a.m. West Coast time. So please note. And our next episode for Values for Life series is episode 48 on peace, Shanti, which is, I think we utter quite a bit. So let's again go deeper into it to understand. For that, we will have our senior sister, Siddhi, who is the director of Brahma Kumaris in Africa. Happening 2 weeks after, 17th of September, Saturday, same timing as today. So 8 p.m. India time, and that's 7:30 a.m. West Coast US Canada time. You'll get all the information of these programs on our websites. That's vihasa.in and vancouver.brahmakumaris.ca. You can get all the videos, including today's video, on our YouTube channels of Vihasa India and Brahma Kumaris Vancouver. So please note, thank you everyone. And now, without further delay, I will invite Sister Denise to take us through the meditation.
Om Shanti. Give yourself time to turn within. And be the being of light. Affirm, feel, and know I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, loving, and blissful being of light. I am light. I am free. I belong to the great being of light, the great source of wisdom. And everything I do is a preparation for the next thing. I am growing, becoming experienced, taking light from the light, taking strength, energy, all of that to be the essential, ideal me. And I sit with myself, remembering who I am. What is my purpose? Who am I with? And everything else is a wonderful game to be enjoyed and to acquire greater skill. Om Shanti.
Thank you so much, Sister Denise. Very, very empowering session today.
Thank you.
Take it in our heart, everyone here. So,
Well, thank you, Claudia, thank you, Dr. Manoj, and all the translators, and it's just lovely to be with you at this time, and lots of love to everyone.
actually, it's our trend to take a photo at the end of the session. So today, I'm sure everybody's feeling their heart really empowered, the concept of self-respect. So let's take the picture with Sister Denise. Everyone who likes to be in the picture, please open your video. A lot of people are opening a bit slowly, but I got it. Thank you so much, Sister Denise, again, and everyone. Have a great day.